Hi, it's Katrina. My friend David is going to be helping me out with the voiceover today, so I hope you enjoy.
Number 10. Mountain lion attack in Colorado. While Trevor Brown was elk hunting in Colorado, he kept hearing rustling in the bushes behind him. At first, he just assumed it was either a deer or an elk moving around in the forest. But he couldn't shake the notion that something was wrong. As it turned out, that dark feeling in his gut was his body giving a very real warning of danger. Trevor had been at the same ridge for about a week, watching elk cross below him and waiting for the right opportunity to make his kill. But since he was going back to the same place again and again, other local predators learned that he was there. One of them was a mountain lion, which pursued him to the ridge and waited for its chance to attack. This was the animal that he heard rustling around in the bushes behind him. When he finally got up to investigate, unable to sit with that uneasy feeling in his gut, he found himself staring into the eyes of a hungry lion. It was standing no more than 10 feet, 3 meters away from him. The situation proved even more immediately dangerous than you might expect. Even though Trevor had a gun with him, the weapon wasn't nearby. All he had for defense in the moment was a bow and arrow. Lucky for him, he reacted quickly enough to stop the huge cat before it pounced. Like a skilled bow hunter, he pulled back an arrow, aimed, and released. His shot went straight through the mountain lion and killed it, just a fraction of a second before the cat had an opportunity to pounce. His accuracy with the bow meant that Trevor had escaped what could have been a fatal attack. Have you ever seen a mountain lion close up? Let me know in the comments below. Number 9. Deadly Pennsylvania. A man in Crawford County, Pennsylvania, suffered a life-threatening injury after he was shot in the chest by another deer hunter. According to the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Lawrence S.Pavolko, 58 years old, was blasted in his chest with a .30-06 rifle by another hunter who mistook him for a deer. He was recently recovering from surgery at the Harnett Medical Center. Shockingly, this was only one of 3 incidents in just 2 weeks in western Pennsylvania in which hunters were accidentally shot. The 2 other incidents were fatal. Just a few days before Lawrence was shot by a fellow hunter, a 72-year-old man in Cambria County was shot by a family member while they were hunting along an old gas line. The family member was a juvenile. He fired a .234 caliber rifle at what he thought was a deer, but it wasn't a deer. The bullet traveled 300 yards, 274 meters, and struck William Tripp, killing him immediately. The other fatality involved a retired police officer. While he and a friend were hunting black bears in Warren County, he was also killed. It was the same awful story. Gary R. Hunt was shot by his nephew after he somehow mistook the older man for a black bear. He too died on the scene. What do you think caused so many similar accidental deaths in the same area? Let me know your theories below. Number 8. The deer that wouldn't die. In Arkansas, a hunter met his ultimate adversary, a deer that simply refused to die. Unfortunately for the hunter, his face-off with this seemingly immortal deer left him dead. According to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, the hunter died after he shot the deer, thought the deer was dead, and unfortunately was killed by his would-be prey. Keith Stevens, Chief of Communications for the Commission, told news outlets that after 20 years of work, this is one of the more unusual things he's encountered. The victim was 66-year-old Thomas Alexander. He shot a buck out in Yellville at about 6:30 p.m., then called a family member to brag about it. About an hour later, he contacted that same family member and said that he was injured and in desperate need of assistance. That family member called 911 and got emergency responders to the site. But it didn't do any good, and Alexander died in the hospital just a little while later. Doctors say he came in with several puncture wounds, and an autopsy revealed these wounds to be the cause of death. What happened is that Thomas thought the deer was dead and approached the animal, but the buck was still alive and it lashed out with its antlers, goring Thomas to death. In the end, both the hunter and the deer died before the day was done. Number 7. A very sad horse. In Hawaii, a horse that was minding her own business found herself being attacked by a pack of hunting dogs. The unfortunate horse belongs to a family in Hakapu, and this family is absolutely furious. Sue and Richard Girton couldn't believe it when their 21-year-old Tennessee Walker Palomino, a beautiful horse named Keel, was just about killed by the dogs while inside her stall. The attack went down at about 4:15 in the morning on a Saturday. A neighbor heard barking and assumed it was a pig hunter out with their pack of hounds. But when they didn't hear any squealing, they knew something was wrong. All they heard was deer and heavy grunting. The grunts were coming from Keel, who was completely helpless as 10 hunting dogs managed to get inside of her stall and start tearing her apart. The poor horse was stuck in her pen and had no way of defending herself. She suffered injuries to her legs, her face, and her rump. By the time a human figured out what was going on and went to help the horse, she was in horrible shape and bleeding profusely. When a veterinarian was called in to assess the damage, the family was informed that the horse was likely bleeding internally. Sadly, this wasn't even the first instance of a family pet being attacked by hunting dogs in Hakapu. One of the neighbors had their family pet, a potbelly pig, badly injured during a similar incident. The locals have since sent out a warning to hunters to stay away from their properties. To make matters more frustrating, a hunter who was caught by authorities denied being involved in the attack and said it wasn't his dogs. The identities of the hunters associated with these hunting dog attacks have remained unpunished. Number 6. French bear attack. In France, a 70-year-old man nearly died after an unexpected encounter with a bear. According to news sources, the hunter was pursuing wild boars through a mountainous and forested region of southern France when the bear sprang on him unexpectedly. The two got into a battle. The man was left with one of his legs severely injured, and the bear was left dead. The old man somehow managed to get the upper hand, but just barely. What's really interesting is that brown bears had actually just about gone extinct in France until 1996. There was just a handful of them left until the French government reintroduced them to the Pyrenees Mountains. French authorities even began importing bears from Slovenia to try and get their numbers up. And now there are about 64 brown bears living in the area. But this increase has led to a problem with local farmers and apparently hunters. In 2020 alone, there were 329 bear incidents. That's quite impressive considering the low number of bears. What do you think should be done about the bears creating havoc in the French countryside? Though they want to keep the population up, the attacks and incidents have caused chaos. So what's the solution here? Let me know how you'd solve the problem in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. French manslaughter. In the southwest of France, a man fired a gun while hunting. The bullet from that gun went through the forest and hit a car that was driving down the road in the middle of the afternoon. The driver just so happened to be an off-duty cop. She heard a loud bang, pulled over onto the side of the road, and saw that someone had shot out her brake light. Shocked, she immediately called for backup. The cops managed to identify the shooter, a man who had been taking part in a boar hunt. But what the authorities have not managed to put together is whether the full bullet hit the car or if it had been a ricochet. Nonetheless, it stirred up quite a bit of controversy in France. The country has been stunned by a recent string of hunting incidents that could result in some new laws coming into play. These laws may prevent people from shooting off their guns in the countryside. In November, just a month before the cop was almost shot while driving, another man died under shockingly similar circumstances. A 67-year-old man was killed after being shot by a 9.3mm hunting bullet accidentally as he was driving down the road. The bullet went through his window and struck the man, killing him. The man who fired the bullet, another senior in his 70s, has since been charged with manslaughter. Several days after this incident, almost the exact same thing happened. A couple pulled over on the side of the road after hearing a loud bang, only to find a bullet lodged in the gas tank of their car. They were fortunate to have managed to escape without an explosion, because a man in his late 70s had been aiming at a deer on the other side of the road. In any case, driving in the countryside seems to be one of the most dangerous things a person can do in France, at least during hunting season. Number 4. Mistaken for a bear. A man by the name of David Green has been killed in a tragic hunting accident. It happened on December the 1st, 2021. David hadn't even been hunting at the time. The outdoorsman, a fan of all things dirty and muddy, had been picking roots along Preston Branch Road in Buren County, West Virginia. According to the West Virginia Natural Resource Police, a man named Jimmy Castle shot and killed David because he reportedly thought he was a bear. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a bear in the wild or at the zoo, but I can guarantee you that they do not look anything like a human. The only thing that may have made David even look remotely like a bear was the fact that he was wearing a black shirt. Basically, he was a dark blur in the trees. But Jimmy never stopped to consider the possibility. He just fired the gun. He went to look at his kill, but told authorities he never found a body because the terrain was too steep. In reality, the truth is that Jimmy probably realized he had shot someone and took off before anyone could catch him. In this case, the accident is going to have consequences. Jimmy probably didn't mean to shoot David, but that doesn't change the fact that he did. He's now facing charges of negligent shooting and failure to render aid. Number 3. Zombie coyote. A hunter was attacked by a zombie coyote. Sounds wild, but of course there's more to this bizarre story. What should have been an ordinary retrieval of a coyote corpse at the end of a hunting trip turned into a terrifying struggle. Of course, the coyote wasn't actually a zombie. It just clung onto life a little more tenaciously than the hunter had planned for. Michigan resident Skip Van Buren was hunting in the bush when he shot a coyote in September. He went to go pick the coyote up, and that was when it appeared to have returned to life and bit him several times. It attacked with such ferocity that Skip was knocked to the ground. If it hadn't been for the bullet already lodged in the coyote, the animal almost certainly would have torn the hunter to shreds. According to Skip himself, the incident caught him totally off guard. He's a professional predator hunter and even puts on seminars on how to properly hunt the most dangerous game. He's killed plenty of coyotes, but this was the first time that one almost killed him. After it bit his hand, the coyote got back onto its feet and began to circle Skip. Because he had left his rifle behind to collect the corpse, he had nothing to defend himself with. He tried to kick the animal, but it simply bit through his shoe and sank its teeth into his foot. It also bit his right leg. It chomped down on his butt, and it wrestled Skip to the ground. But all that fighting had really tuckered the coyote out. Because it was already injured, that was as much damage as it could do. It got tired, gave up, and allowed Skip to run back to his rifle and kill the coyote, completely this time. What would you do if the game you'd hunted appeared to come back to life? Tell me in the comments. Number 2. The hunter is hunted. A hunter became the hunted deep in the woods of Colorado. The young woman, known only as Mackenzie, is a native of South Carolina. She got separated from her father on a hunting trip, and she came face to face with the most dangerous predator in the state. Alone, staring into the face of a hissing mountain lion, she had no choice but to fight back against the animal. Though, of course, not before the young woman pulled out her phone and began filming. She caught the entire encounter on video, with the cougar crouched and growling, snarling, and basically foaming at the mouth. Mackenzie tried to scare it away, waving her arms and yelling, but it just wasn't enough. Only when she pretended to charge at it did the cat retreat into the woods. But just a few seconds later, it turned around and decided to pounce. That was when Mackenzie had to ditch her phone, pick up her gun, and blast the big cat in self-defense. This was not a win for anybody. Colorado Parks and Wildlife later discovered the mountain lion dead from the woman's bullet. In a post on social media, Mackenzie apologized for the death and said that she absolutely did not want to shoot the big cat. She only did it because at that moment it really seemed like a choice between life or death. Number 1. Accidental murder. In the most tragic hunting accident of all, a young girl has been killed by her very own father. Her name was Daisy Grace Lynn George, who was 11 years old and in 6th grade. According to the Harrison County, Texas deputies, Daisy's father killed her with a high-powered rifle. When deputies and EMS units got to the scene, the girl was already in very bad shape. And because of bad weather, Emergency helicopters couldn't get the child to the hospital in time. She was transported to the closest medical center, where she was ultimately pronounced dead. Unlike most of the accidents we talked about today, the father wasn't actually trying to shoot anything. He didn't mistake his daughter for game. Instead, he told the police that he was trying to clear the hammer of his hunting rifle when the shot went off. He thought the gun was unloaded, and his daughter was standing right in front of him when the gun discharged. He immediately called 911, but unfortunately for both he and his family, it wasn't enough. It's safe to say that for the rest of his life, this father is going to be plagued by the results of this tragedy. Are you a hunter or are interested in hunting? Have you ever worried about an accident like any of these happening? Let me know in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching today's video. Remember to hit subscribe and come back soon.